Hello there, everybody in the digital world, and welcome back to yet another episode of Spliced in Later. And you know what? It's been 4 days since I spoke about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so why don't we talk about it again? As promised, though, if you're a regular listener on this show, you know we touch on that very often, and it's just a coincidence that not only did Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness be released last week, but the last episode of Moon Knight was also available on Disney Plus. And with the new MCU content, I get on that stuff pretty quickly. I hope everyone has had a chance to go and see Doctor Strange over the weekend, or if you haven't yet, that you are planning to. I'm looking at the reviews online, and I think everybody's being a little harsh on it for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, maybe it's people are sick of it. It's fair. As I said, it's the 28th or 29th MCU film. Even I couldn't keep track. But I think it's genuinely an enjoyable time. And while it's not the best MCU film, it's definitely not the worst. And I think it's a solid showcasing of Sam Raimi talent and the storylines and the multiverse and all that stuff. It's unique, it's fresh, it's definitely worth checking out. So don't listen to bad word of mouth, just listen to me, I guess, if you want to. I'm sure you will. The box office shows that even if people are saying it's shit, people are still going to see it, but who cares? Anyway, we're not talking about Doctor Strange. We are talking about Moon Knight, and part of our ongoing showcase here on Spliced in Later of MCU properties, whether we are going all the way back into the past and going through the older movies, which we haven't done in a while. I think we should look into that sooner rather than later, and then reviewing the newer stuff that have come out, which only recently have started to pick up. During the 2020 spell, I didn't have much to talk about in terms of MCU. 2021, we had 4 movies to get through, but more importantly, there have been content on Disney Plus TV series, which is new to the MCU world. It's a new Phase 4 part, because apparently all the MCU TV shows that came out before it are no longer canon. I'll say right here on this show that I disagree with that. I consider everything that came before canon. Sure, it gets a bit difficult trying to fit it into the timeline and the plots and whatever, but this stuff was created. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daredevil, Agent Carter, Inhumans, Cloak and Dagger, they were all built on the precipice of the MCU, and they're originally designed to not interact with that world per se, but just exist in it. And it is a bit lazy to go, oh, well, none of that counts now. Now it does. Now it does. So a hint for future episodes when I'm going back through the MCU of the past is that I will be talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter and the Netflix shows and Hulu shows and Freeform shows and the disaster that was Inhumans and the nightmare that was Hellstrom. Going through all of it. Not necessarily season by season. It will be more of a summary of the show in general. So look forward to that if you were or are. But I'm excited today to talk about Moon Knight. It's a unique one. I will say that the one thing that worries me about every MCU entry recently is the fear that the production and the stories are leaning more towards into references and callbacks and throwbacks and cameos and remember this and remember that. What makes the MCU so good is the storytelling and its ability to introduce new characters and have them weave seamlessly within each other. Back in the early days, if Hulk showed up in the Thor film, it made sense thematically. It was part of the storyline. If Captain America had a fight with all his other superheroes, at the end of the day, it was still a Captain America film. And although I really, really like Spider-Man No Way Home, and I quite like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and I have enjoyed the Disney Plus TV shows that have come out, there does seem to be more an essence into cameos and callbacks and references, which is fine, but we need to have that balance between that and a genuine good story. Spider-Man No Way Home is great, but a lot of the marketing was, you have to come see this movie because remember Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man 2, remember Green Goblin from Spider-Man 1, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The whole marketing for that became just, here's a little snippet of a cameo, here's a little voice of another cameo. You got to come see this movie because this person might appear in the movie. And it became less about what the movie itself actually is about, specifically Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch and everything going on there. Now, the MCU TV shows on Disney Plus, they are relatively good stuff. I have had varied reactions to them, but there's always been a sort of positive response to them. But what I was excited for Moon Knight, that these other shows do not have, is originality and uniqueness. Because, yes, Each show is different. WandaVision is not the same show that The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is. But all of these shows that have come before have relied on the thing I mentioned earlier, which is remember these characters. We're continuing those stories and that world, which is fine. It's good to have secondary characters like Bucky and Sam, or Wanda and Vision, or Loki, or Clint, all of them pushed into the forefront. But it's still stuff we've already seen before, just an expanding story of it. WandaVision is what happens to Wanda after Endgame and the ultimate fate of Vision. Bucky and Sam is Sam learning to become Captain America and Bucky learning to shake off the Winter Soldier stuff. Loki is Loki being Loki. The concept of the show is unique, but we're still focused on Loki, a character we've already met. Hawkeye, we get a nice balance of, yes, new character like Kate Bishop, but it's still Clint Barton, Hawkeye, bringing in Kingpin and Yelena Belova, characters we've already met before. And I mean, What If? What If is basically just highlights and hits, showcasing of all these different story points in the MCU and just told differently, but it's all these different characters doing all these sorts of different things. Moon Knight, completely different concept. We are introduced to a person we've never met, a world we've never met, a villain we've never met, scenarios, settings, themes, the way of storytelling. It's all different. It's back in those early days when a Captain America movie could be a political thriller and Guardians of the Galaxy could be a space opera and Ant-Man could be a heist. It's something that is not, remember this from previous stuff. It's, here's a new world, here's a new theme, here's a new way of telling it. So anticipation was very high for this one, especially because Oscar Isaac was playing Moon Knight, and because I know very little about Moon Knight, I was excited to learn the story of it. So here is my knee-jerk reaction of having seen Moon Knight, having just finished all 6 episodes. I will apologize in advance. I don't feel particularly great as I'm talking, so I don't think this will go for very long. But also because, as it is unique and new concepts, new themes, new characters, I don't want to spoil anything, which is hard when you talk about a TV show because it is a evolving story over 6 episodes, and sometimes big story points will drop at the end of a particular episode that completely changes the way you perceive the show, the way characters are aligned, or where they're headed in certain directions. So to talk about any of those specific plot points during the show means, as hard as I try not to, I will spoil 1 or 2 other things. So this is going to be a generic reaction to the overall show, as vague as possible, and then hopefully, if you didn't know Moon Knight was out, if you hadn't got around to watching it, if you seemed like it wasn't your cup of tea, maybe you might be convinced to watch it. And by those words and the way I say that, you can probably tell that this is going to be a positive talk about Moon Knight. Now, the vague plot of Moon Knight is very simple. Oscar Isaac plays an Englishman called Stephen Grant. Stephen is a lovable loser. He is very self-aware. He has no confidence. He has no drive. He has basically no friends from the looks of it. He lives alone in a little loft with a goldfish. But every night he chains himself to his bed because he says he suffers from this sleep problem where he will go sleepwalking when he's asleep and wake up God knows where. And the only way he can prevent himself from doing that, or at least try to, is to fully restrain himself. Aside from that, though, he has an inability to connect with people. He stumbles about through life. He's very aimless. He talks to street performers who cannot talk back to him. He is a doofus. All he does is leave messages for his mum on his phone. But as the story goes along in that first episode, we learn that these times where he's so-called blacking out and sleepwalking is in fact not the case. For inside Stephen Grant's mind is supposedly a completely other personality. This personality is called Mark Spector. And where Stephen Grant is a bumbling Englishman, Mark Spector is a hardcore American violent person. Or not that violent, but he's much more confident and action-packed than Stephen Grant. Mark says that he is in fact a vessel or an avatar for an Egyptian god called Khonshu. Khonshu is an asshole who has channeled his power into Mark to make him his Moon Knight, which is essentially his soldier to wage war on people that Khonshu deems need justice brought on them by any means necessary. Once Stephen learns of this, the whole show is basically a back and forth between Mark and Stephen, trying to regain control. Mark supposedly has a mission. His mission from Khonshu is to track down this cult leader called Arthur Harrow, played by Ethan Hawke, who walks around with glass in his shoes and speaks of balancing scales, who supposedly is on a mission to release another Egyptian god called Ammit, who apparently bad things will happen if this occurs. While Mark is doing this and hunting down his cult and going into the Moon Knight persona, his whole has a completely different life to what Steven's going on with, as Steven realizes when Mark's ex-wife, Layla, shows up back in his life, demanding to know where he is and what is going on. I can't talk too much about it because every 2 episodes or so we learn a big secret that changes the concept of the show, and I don't want anybody to know that going into it. But to sum it up entirely, the whole show is the back and forth between Mark and Steven. Which one of them is the real personality? Which one of them is the alternate personality? Who has control of the body? Who doesn't? Who's in the right? Who's in the wrong? Are they going to come together and stop Arthur Harrow, or are they going to fracture completely? Does Stephen Grant ever get to be the Moon Knight, or is specifically Mark Spector? And then by the end of it all, there is a confrontation, of course, between the forces of Khonshu and the forces of Ammit in a standard MCU action-packed affair, and then resulting in a very satisfying conclusion to the Moon Knight story, where obviously hints at where it could go if we were to delve back into more Moon Knight TV shows, or if Moon Knight ever were to cross into other MCU properties. Now, it is extremely effective and I enjoyed it a lot. As I said, because it's an original story, from the very first episode, meeting Stephen Grant and then learning about Mark Spector and Moon Knight and Khonshu, each episode was intriguing, it was engaging, it was really interesting to learn about this superhero and his supporting characters and the powers that be and why he does what he does. Having known absolutely nothing about Moon Knight, it was really refreshing to have something stand on its own 2 feet in telling its own story. There is minimal references in this thing. It does exist in the MCU world. If you look around, you can spot on like giant TVs in the streets of London that are talking about the blip, or when they talk about other realms besides the Egyptian gods, they do mention the ancestral plane, wherein the Black Panther legends are. But there is no cameo, there is no surprise appearance, there are no post-credit scenes on the end of each episode. There is, of course, in the last one, but that's common tradition. There is no, oh, I need to call up S.H.I.E.L.D. Oh, I need to reach out to my old friend Clint Barton. Oh, look up, is that Spider-Man swinging by? There's nothing. If you didn't know, if you were just told to watch Moon Knight and someone removed all the logos off it, and you had no idea it was an MCU Marvel product, you would be forgiven for not ever knowing that Moon Knight existed in the MCU. And I think it stands on its own and it excels because of it. Because you do not have to go, you're not pulled out of the experience of the Moon Knight story. Sometimes cameos work really well, sometimes they don't. But nearly all the time, when you recognize something, or as something is diverting your attention to something else that's in conjunction with the story but not in service of the story, it will always pull you out. The ancestral plane, for example, while mentioned in Moon Knight, it did pull me out because I did not immediately recognize where the ancestral plane came from. I had to look up and remember, oh yeah, it's the Black Panther spiritual realm. So in Moon Knight, when somebody says, oh yeah, this is the afterlife, but it's not as nice as the ancestral plane, it pulled me out of the story because I went, oh, I know that's a thing. That's an MCU thing. Where have I heard it before? Hang on, Moon Knight character, stop talking. I'm trying to track that reference. And that's just the one real reference in Moon Knight, and it still pulled me out. So the rest of it, just being a Moon Knight story with, I guess, a backdrop of an MCU that you don't really need to know is there, is great. And it's intriguing, and it's unique, and it's exciting. And the fact that the story pulls me in and made me attached to these brand new characters that I never met before. So by the end of episode 6, I could honestly say that not only was Moon Knight my favorite of the MCU Disney Plus shows, but that Mark Spector and Stephen Grant and Moon Knight, this character would be one of my favorite MCU superheroes of all time. Now, that is because specifically of the incredible performance Oscar Isaac gives as Mark Spector / Stephen Grant / Moon Knight / who knows else. He's in the show like 99% of the time. There are very few scenes where he's not there. And not only is he putting in an incredible performance, he's doing it ×2. Because Mark and Stephen are our dual protagonists. Yes, they are in the one body. And yes, you can say that they're alternate personalities, but it's still the same person. But Mark and Stephen are extremely different, light years apart in terms of personality, desires, the way they react to conflict and danger, the way they interact with Layla, the ex-wife who comes into the affair. They are so different that you could say two different actors are playing two different characters. But of course, Oscar Isaac is doing both. In many instances, there are just scenes where he is engaging with himself, Mark and Stephen, having their back and forth. And it is very well done. Stephen is lovably goofy. He's probably my favorite of the two. He's the heart and soul of the show, whereas Mark is the action and heroic side that you would expect from an MCU product. But by the end, they form this very strained, slightly unwanted bond and camaraderie to confront Arthur Harrow and deal with the issues that are going on. And by the end of it, you felt a real strong connection between the two of them. And the fact that you are feeling a strong connection between two characters that one actor is playing is outstanding, phenomenal. I knew right from the start when Oscar Isaac was cast as Moon Knight that it was a good choice. And by the end of the show, I absolutely knew that I was right and everybody else was right as well. There's all the rumors and rumblings online that apparently Oscar Isaac only signed one contract to appear on this Moon Knight show, and people are already panicking that he may not come back or someone else might play Moon Knight. But Oscar Isaac has embodied the character, or characters I should say, so well and so wholeheartedly with so much emotion and gravitas that I already cannot picture anybody else ever playing the Moon Knight character. There are a few other supporting characters around him, but for the most part, Moon Knight doesn't drown in oodles and oodles of other main players and supporting cast characters. You have Layla, who is the ex-wife of Mark, who comes back into the story, and she is a fierce, strong, independent character in her own right, who has her own motives and drives for trying to go after Arthur Harrow and things that happened in her past with Mark, while also forming this slight romantic bond with Stephen. She gets a lot to do as well in that last episode as well, that really shows her as a hero in her own right as well, which is great. Ethan Hawke puts in a very subdued performance as Arthur Harrow, the cult leader. He doesn't chew the scenery, he doesn't monologue. He's basically just, I would like to release this god, and I'm going to do it. Please don't get in my way. You've got in my way, that's annoying, but I'm just going to move past that because nothing will stop me. It's very cool, calm, subdued, and interesting villain that is, I think, unique to all the other over-the-top scenery-chewing villains that we've got in the past. But Layla, Arthur Harrow, even the gods Khonshu and all of that going on, they serve in support of Moon Knight's story. They don't steal the spotlight, and they know that they're not supposed to. It's all complementary to the Moon Knight origin story or concluding story. Moon Knight's been around for a long time. Marcus Spector has been Moon Knight for quite a bit. So when Stephen Grant becomes aware of it, apparently Moon Knight is looking to get out. Mark's had enough of it. And the history that he has with Harrow and Layla shows that there's a lot of missing story that we didn't get. I don't think it needs to be told, but it is an interesting point to jump in to the Moon Knight story. The visuals look great. I mean, it's Disney Plus MCU shows. They must have a pretty good budget, obviously on level with some of the films. Looks great for a TV show. That line between movies and TV shows just continues to be blurred with stuff like this. And at the end of the day, it is a solid, self-contained, limited series. It tells the origin of Moon Knight and introduces us to all the characters. It has a thing that he needs to prevent, a story he needs to complete. And when the show ends, it ends in a satisfactory manner with hints of where the story could go if we were to return to the Moon Knight saga. But unlike some cases, like Loki Season 1, which I guess looking back on it, I didn't know there'd be a Loki Season 2. So I was looking, if I did know that, I might have looked at it a bit differently. But Loki felt like a really long story that didn't even get to the halfway point before the show was over. And just that last little stamp going, Loki will return in season 2, for me, still didn't take away from the whole, I feel like this story hasn't been told properly. It took a really long time to get to this point, 6 episodes, and I feel like we've been told the first act of a movie. Moon Knight feels like a long movie from start to finish, but it doesn't step away and feel like, oh, where's my ending? You've taken it away. It's just the story is just sort of stopped. It doesn't feel like Eternals. Eternals is a fantastic movie, but it is jarring on every rewatch in those last 30 seconds when Eternals basically starts Eternals 2. And you go, whoa, hang on, what's going on? And then the credits roll and you go, whoa, what's happening? Moon Knight is perfectly paced. It knows how to spend each episode. It knows not to get too bogged down in its own origins and storytelling and references. It knows how to conclude the story. It ends in a much more effective, high-stakes conclusion than Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or even Hawkeye, in my opinion. But it also doesn't spoon-feed you everything. If you are a fan of Moon Knight in the comics, you will obviously pick up on a lot more references to his comic stories than I did. I mean, I've seen on TikTok and Screen Rant and everything else I've looked at, they're always talking about this Moon Knight thing is in reference to Moon Knight number 7061 when he did this. These characters are references to the creators of Moon Knight. There's these other personalities that Moon Knight could potentially have besides Mark and Steven. Here's where one was hinted at here, and here's another where that was hinted at there. You don't need to know that. If you are Moon Knight fans, you will obviously get a kick out of it. But I knew enough. I was able to tell from the storytelling that, this is hinting at something that could potentially be expanded on. But I don't need it. It does not need to be told in this story. It's a nice little, a tantalizing taste of what could come, if possible. But if we never saw Moon Knight again, it's a perfect little story of this Egyptian god and his avatar and the split personalities and everything going on in this very small corner of the MCU. And I thought that was great. Overall, Moon Knight is, in my opinion, the best of the MCU Disney Plus shows so far. I'm not sure what the overall reaction is. I originally thought that everybody gave it unanimous praise, but recently I've heard the exact opposite. So I think it's either you absolutely love this show or you think you just haven't been bothered to watch it. I don't think anyone who's watched it could say, that's boring. That's nothing. Give me What If Season 2 over Moon Knight. No, I don't think so. I think if you haven't watched it and you're just in the superhero fatigue, I understand, but I think the effort put into Moon Knight, the interesting story, the great visuals, the absolutely phenomenal casting in Oscar Isaac as multiple characters, Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, the Egyptian themes, the hints at more to come if needed, but just a satisfying conclusion to a point where you could sit down on a Saturday afternoon and just watch the story of Moon Knight and then walk away. It's great stuff. It's definitely the best one so far, in my opinion. I'd even rank it higher than a lot of the MCU movies that I've seen. So that's pretty good. I highly endorse it. And if you haven't got around to watching it, don't worry. All 6 episodes are now available on Disney Plus, so you can watch it all uninterrupted and get a really good, solid, unique, individual MCU story that stands on its own feet without having to worry about cameos and references and multiverse and all the other stuff that's at the moment being used to market the MCU more than the actual stories themselves. There you are. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed, and I hope you are considering giving Moon Knight a try. I will be back next week, I believe, just for a normal episode. I doubt I'll be catching any movies later this week because if my suspicions are correct, I may not be allowed to leave the house for a couple of days. We will have to see. But until then, thank you all for listening to me. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you. I hope you get some good MCU content over the next few days with Doctor Strange and Moon Knight. There's plentiful stuff to be had at the moment. It's a good time to be alive. Otherwise, I'll catch you all next week. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.